Ahad. Carl Jung once said, "What you suppress doesn't disappear, it returns as fate." Every man carries two lives within him, the life he shows the world and the life he hides in silence. But silence is never empty. Silence holds the truth he avoids, the wounds he denies, the fears he runs from. When love is lost, he believes it is the woman's absence that breaks him. But in truth, it is her silence that awakens his shadow, because in her silence, he can no longer escape himself. Her absence becomes a mirror, showing him the rejection he never healed, the pride he always protected, the loneliness he buried as a child. The ego whispers, "You are strong. You don't care. You can move on." But deep inside, the shadow speaks louder. It says, "You are wounded. You are afraid. You are not as free as you pretend to be." And so begins the battle within, between the man he wants the world to see and the man he meets in the mirror of silence. This is where Jung's wisdom cuts deep. Love does not only expose connection, it exposes the shadow, and until a man faces it, he cannot truly be free. Sheikh Abdul Ahad. In the quiet aftermath of loss, the fragile ego begins its defense. It tells him stories. She was never the one. I never cared that much. She will regret leaving me. But these stories are not truth. They are protection. Protection against the unbearable reality that her silence pierced deeper than her words ever could. Jung said, "The shadow is everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves." And in this moment, the shadow rises. The man looks into her absence, but what he truly sees is himself. The boy who was once unseen, the child who feared not being enough, the man who built walls of pride to hide a heart of fear. Every memory of her is an echo of what he lost, but also of what he never healed. He thinks it is her he cannot forget, but in truth it is his own reflection. Her silence becomes the stage where his ego and shadow wrestle endlessly. The louder his pride shouts, the clearer his wounds speak. And though he hides it from the world, in the stillness of night, he cannot hide it from himself. Because silence has a way of breaking the masks we wear. And when the mask falls, the shadow remains. Sheikh Abdul Ahad. The shadow grows restless. It does not disappear simply because he denies it. Instead, it waits, lurking in silence, rising in dreams, appearing in the sudden ache of memory. Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And so he believes fate cursed him with loss, when in truth it is his own unhealed wounds shaping his destiny. He begins to chase substitutes, new faces, fleeting passions, shallow victories. But none of them silence the echo, because it was never about her alone. It was about the part of himself she awakened. She had touched the places he had buried. The longing for acceptance, the hunger to be truly seen, the fear of abandonment that stretched back to childhood. This is why he cannot let go, not because she was perfect, but because she revealed his imperfection. And now, every attempt to escape her memory only deepens the prison of his own mind. For what he runs from is not her shadow, but his own. Sheikh Abdul Ahad. The breaking point arrives. No matter how far he runs, no matter how many masks he wears, the silence of his shadow follows. He tries to drown it in noise, work, distractions, new lovers, endless ambition. But the truth whispers in quiet moments, and truth cannot be silenced. Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes at last." He begins to turn inward. The mirror of her absence becomes a teacher. For the first time, he dares to ask, "What am I really running from?" It is not her smile he fears losing. It is not her love he craves. It is the wound inside him, the wound her silence revealed. He remembers the boy he once was, afraid of rejection, desperate for approval, believing love must be earned through control or pride. And suddenly the pain makes sense. Her silence had not punished him, it had awakened him, it had forced him to see the truth, that the prison was never her absence, but his own shadow. And so begins the hardest step, to sit with himself, to face the emptiness, to name the fears that haunted him. This is not weakness. This is the birth of healing. Sheikh Abdul Ahad. Silence becomes his teacher. The shadow, once feared, becomes his guide. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Now he begins to see, the woman was never the prison, the silence was never the punishment, it was the mirror. He learns to sit in stillness, to breathe with his wounds instead of hiding them, to listen not to her absence, but to his own soul. Slowly, the ego soft. Slowly, the ego softens. The mask of pride falls away. And in that rawness, he discovers a deeper strength, the kind that comes not from control, but from acceptance. He does not forget her. Some women remain unforgettable, not because they stayed, but because their silence awakened his truth. And so he thanks her, not with words, not with letters, but with the life he chooses to live now. A life no longer chained by shadow, but illuminated by it. For what was once darkness now becomes light. This is healing. This is transformation. This is the journey of silence, shadow, and the soul. There comes a moment when the silence no longer feels heavy, but holy. It is no longer the echo of loss, but the birthplace of wisdom. He realizes now, the shadow is not his enemy. It is his forgotten self, the child, the dreamer, the wounded one, all waiting to be seen, to be embraced. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And so, he stops running. He turns inward. He faces the shadow, not with fear, but with compassion. The woman who once stirred this awakening, she fades like a star at dawn. Yet her impact remains eternal. Because she was never here to stay, she was here to awaken. Now he understands. Every silence carried a message. Every wound held a lesson. Every shadow pointed toward light. The journey is not over, but he is no longer the same man who began it. He has walked through silence, survived the mirror, and found himself on the other side. This is the gift of the shadow. This is the eternal echo of her silence. And now his soul whispers, "I am whole." There is a stage in every journey where the silence transforms into music. Not the music of the world outside, but the song of the soul within. He no longer fights the absence. He no longer fears the shadow. Instead, he listens. And in that listening, he hears the truth. Nothing was ever lost. It was only hidden, waiting to be found. Carl Jung believed that the greatest act of courage is not to conquer the world, but to confront the self. And so, the man who once trembled in silence now walks with it. The emptiness that haunted him has become the space where light is born. The woman who awakened his shadow, she is no longer an obsession, no longer a wound, but a guide. Her silence was never punishment. It was initiation. Now he carries her echo, not as a chain, but as a compass. And he finally sees that healing was never about holding on to her, but about holding on to himself. The journey of shadow and silence ends here, not with despair, but with wholeness. For in every man and in every woman, the shadow waits. And only by walking through it can we discover the light we were always meant to be.